It's not just in Michigan. The political landscape is charged nationwide. So what does the tension mean for America's democracy? My next guest has a few thoughts on this. Stephen Levitsky is a professor of government at Harvard University and the co-author of the book, How Democracies Die. Thank you so much for joining us. So the book has received a whole lot of attention, particularly since January 6th. And your sort of study, your focus has actually been democracies in South America. But you looked at patterns, and in How Democracies Die, even though it was published in 2018, you made a lot of predictions, including that the U.S. would be marked by polarization, more departures from unwritten political conventions, and increasing institutional warfare. And I think we saw this sort of peak on January 6th. And I think a lot of people saw what happened on January 6th and thought, whoa, we have come to the edge. We should back away from the edge. But have we? Are we still following this pattern of behavior in this country?
We are. It looked briefly like we'd reached that point in which we would step back from the brink after January 6th for a couple of days. But unfortunately, within a few days, it became clear that the energy, the real core within the Republican Party was in the same place, was continuing to move in an authoritarian direction. The two key elements of any democratic political party, any party that's committed to democracy, are a willingness to always accept election defeat and a willingness to always eschew political violence, to always denounce and avoid political violence. And in the aftermath of the election, the Republican Party abandoned both of those principles, and they haven't gotten them back.
Is it just the Republican Party, or have both parties changed in the last 4 or perhaps more than 4 years?
Parties always change, but the Democratic Party leadership, for all of its warts and mistakes, continues to be committed to democratic rules of the game. You don't see the Democratic Party leadership not accepting defeat. You don't see the Democratic Party leadership accepting, condoning, justifying political violence. You don't see the Democratic Party taking steps to restrict the vote, to make it more difficult for Americans to vote. What can be more crucial to democracy than the right to vote? Only one party is working against these basic democratic principles, and that is the Republican Party.
So then, what can we do in the short term and then in the long term to shift this pattern? Because, we're heading into the midterm elections. It certainly seems like Donald Trump continues, and sort of that philosophy continues to hold sway over much of the Republican Party. What needs to be done to shift this?
I think in the short term, as long as Donald Trump has a dominant role in the Republican Party, that there be a very broad coalition against Trumpism, against the authoritarian wing of the Republican Party, which means that Democrats, including progressive Democrats, need to form a coalition with conservatives and Republicans who are committed to democracy. And it's only that coalition is big enough to win elections. The Democratic Party by itself is very vulnerable to losing elections to an authoritarian party, and that is how democracies die.
Well, Stephen, I feel like this conversation was just an appetizer, but we have to move on. Hopefully this encourages other people to sort of ask themselves the question about what's happening with our democracy, and I appreciate you having you here.
Thanks for having me.